when we see all the FUD, right, it is, the more transactions are on Bitcoin, or the more people that adopt Bitcoin, the more energy it's going to use, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, maybe you can explain this, because I think this is kind of like the ultimate FUD buster, but also for people that are not really following this is massively interesting.
Sure. So this all helps adoption enormously, because in order for the mainstream and large financial institutions to adopt Bitcoin, they have to feel comfortable that it's going to be a net good to humanity. And so the fact we've now got 22 peer-reviewed journals showing that it is net good to the environment, that it does help to stabilize the grid, to accelerate the green energy transition, to mitigate methane, to recycle heat, to obviate gas peaker plants, to make batteries more efficient, to reduce the cost that it takes, the time that it takes to get solar and wind operators profitable. It's tremendously important. So it's been a big part of turning around perceptions and really does increase adoption. And at the same time, what's happened is a lot of those first generation studies on Bitcoin have been widely debunked. There was some papers that suggested, for example, that as hash rate increased and as Bitcoin price increased, that Bitcoin's energy use would go out of control and its emissions would get out of hand. And it's just not the case. And it's not the case for a couple of reasons. Firstly, there were some fundamental flaws in the research. They assumed, for example, that energy came from its transactions. As just about everyone in Bitcoin understands, it does not come from its transactions. It comes from mining it. So you can have 1,000 times more transactions on the Bitcoin network. It doesn't use any more energy at all. They're completely independent. And what this graph is showing is that over a 4-year period, so over an entire halving cycle, price went up 6 times, hash rate went up 8 times, but the amount of emissions stayed static over a full 4-year period. And that happened for 2 reasons. Number one, the use of more efficient machines.
Yes.
But that's right. People tend to forget Moore's law when making these predictions. But the second thing was Bitcoin was migrating to cleaner energy sources. So using predominantly sustainable net zero emission sources of energy now. And so this single graphic has actually helped put a lot of policymaker and regulator minds at rest, because they can see, oh, good, we're not going to boil the oceans from using Bitcoin. In fact, not only that, but if you compare it to the banking network, whereas its computational power goes up from its data center use, emissions don't stay static there. They're not using more renewable energy. Right, they're using the same as they always were, which is grid mix, which might be improving 1% per year, but it's not the accelerated rate that Bitcoin is. And so every time that you're using Bitcoin for a transaction, not the banking network, I would argue that it's actually net emission reducing, because you're migrating to a less emission intensive network. Every time you use Bitcoin rather than gold as a store of value, I would again say it's net emission reducing, because the environmental footprint of gold and its emission intensity is off the charts. It's one of the most dirty energy industries you can possibly imagine. Its environmental impact is devastating. It leaves huge scars on the landscape. And that's just not the case with Bitcoin. It works very synergistically with the landscape, with the environment, and with renewable energy operators. And its emission intensity is way less than gold. So in the same way that you hop in an EV, you're using fewer emissions than if you hop in a fossil fuel-driven car. When you use Bitcoin to transact rather than banking network, you're reducing the net emissions, the net load on the planet.
I remember from our last conversation that we talked about the people having FUD and the haters, and that we should actually love them, right, instead of burning them on Twitter. But with this, I just think like I think this is why I think about Bitcoin every day, in a sense that it is just so ultimately transparent, but also righteous in a certain way, right? Like, it is actually showing that it's a net good for the world in multiple ways. I don't think we have this graph, right? But the current Bitcoin mining sustainability, the percentage is 52%, I think, or maybe it's already higher, right? But it's over 50%. Yeah, like you said, let's look at the banking industry. Like, where are they at? They have their mouth full about ESG and all these things, and we're doing and in their marketing we're doing the best for the world, etc. But are you actually, right? And again, with Bitcoin, this is again really proof of work. It's showing that its incentives again are positively aligned to eventually end up with now currently over 50% sustainable energy resource, right? So I just think it's very cool. The trend here is also up, right? It's progressing. So
correct. It's getting more and more every single year. And there's no comparison between the banking sector. The banking sector doesn't mitigate any methane. The banking sector doesn't stabilize grids. The banking system doesn't help the profitability of renewable energy. It doesn't obviate fossil fuel. It doesn't do any of those things. It doesn't do heat recycling, and it uses way more emissions, right? So it's tethered to the grid, so it's at the mercy of whatever the grid happens to be. It doesn't incentivize the usage of wasted energy. It doesn't encourage innovation in the energy sector, and it doesn't help stabilize grids. It doesn't help bring down power prices. So again, when you're using Bitcoin, you have all of those other benefits to humanity that come along, benefits to the environment, benefits to humanity, and benefits to the energy sector that come with it. So every time you're using Bitcoin to transact, you are helping promote a more, I would say, a technology that is more part of the life economy rather than what other people would call the death economy.